There's some people that lost almost everything, and many that lost a lot.
It was a historic weekend in North Dakota, but not for good reasons. Thanks for joining us here at 6. I'm Justin Benny.
And I'm Stacy Van Dyke. Tonight, fire crews are continuing to battle several wildfires burning throughout western North Dakota. The number of acres burned in North Dakota since Saturday now tops 50,000.
Governor Doug Burgum surveyed the region and the damage this morning. Michael Anthony gives us a look.
Looked like a mess.
Devastation on many fronts, and people still combating a growing crisis of wildfires.
Yeah, pretty scary.
Governor Doug Burgum and several officials flew over McKenzie and Williams counties Monday to witness the damage themselves. Early estimates are that the fires have impacted more than 50,000 total acres.
But it's possible that Saturday, when it all comes in, is going to go down as one of the worst combined fire days in the history of North Dakota.
Many local and volunteer firefighters are still out on the front lines, most with little rest, but understanding what's at stake.
And it is overwhelming as a district chief to see every single fire department that showed up.
Burgum says while the number of acres and livestock lost is significant, crediting the amount of those in the path of the blaze are even more important to mention.
We've not just saved lives and livelihood, we've saved entire communities this weekend, but we got work ahead of us.
Those impacted in any way of these fires should contact the North Dakota Insurance Department for more information on recovering from the damages.
An official with the U.S. Forest Service warned that these fires are far from over due to the ongoing low humidity and higher winds expected later this week. He went as far as to say efforts could continue until snow arrives. Oof.